Before we begin, I want to welcome you to our channel. For those who are new here, our mission is to share genuine Christian testimonies from around the world, spreading the powerful message of God's kingdom. We focus on stories about Jesus, the afterlife, heaven and hell, and other Bible-related topics, bringing them to you in engaging story form twice or 3 times a week. We invite you to become a member of this family by subscribing to our channel. God bless you as you do so. Today's experience is that of a brother who was a chronic drunkard, but by God's mercies, he is now a committed Christian. He died and was shown shocking things in hell. Stay to the end to fully understand his experience. I will begin reading as sent to us. Hi, my name is Lucas Noah. Growing up, I was always surrounded by a blend of family and the broader environment that seemed to affect me in different directions. But there was one figure who stood out more than anyone else. My uncle. He wasn't just a relative, he was like a mentor, a guide, though not in the way most people would expect. From a young age, my uncle was a constant presence in my life. He always had a way with people, and wherever he went, I was usually tagging along. My parents were busy working, trying to make ends meet, and they trusted him to look after me. I looked up to him. He seemed to know everyone, and everyone seemed to like him. But there was something else about him, a side that, as a child, I didn't fully understand. Whenever we walked down the street, my uncle would bump into friends, and more often than not, they'd head to a local bar. I still wonder why till today, none of them could advise him to stop exposing me to such a lifestyle. Or why didn't those bars prohibit him from taking me along into such adult gathering? Even though it's just for a few times, but it doesn't matter. I began to notice the way my uncle would sip his drink, the way he seemed to relax with every sip. It fascinated me, though I didn't realize it then. That fascination would become something much more dangerous. My uncle's friends, many of whom were regulars at the bar, started to recognize me as his little buddy. They'd pat me on the back, ruffle my hair, and sometimes even joke about how I'd be joining them for a drink when I was old enough. These moments seemed harmless at the time, just adults being friendly. But they planted seeds that would later grow into something I couldn't control. As I grew older, my bond with my uncle only strengthened. He was always there, and I admired him more than anyone else. My introduction to alcohol was like being handed a key to a world that had always seemed mysterious and exciting. My uncle, the man I admired so much, was the one who opened that door for me. I still remember the first time he handed me a beer. We were sitting on the porch after a long day, and he casually passed me the bottle, saying, "You're old enough to handle this, right?" I didn't hesitate. I took that bottle, took a sip, and felt a strange mix of pride and excitement. It tasted bitter, unfamiliar, but there was something about it that drew me in. At first, it was just a sip here and there. My uncle never pushed me, but he didn't stop me either. Whenever we were out, he'd order a drink for himself, and slowly, I started doing the same. It became a habit, something we did together. It made me feel grown up, like I was part of his world. What I didn't realize was that every sip was pulling me deeper into a lifestyle that would eventually consume me. The descent into alcoholism wasn't sudden. It was gradual, almost imperceptible. What started as an occasional drink quickly became more frequent. I began to crave that feeling, the warmth in my chest, the way it made the world seem a little less sharp around the edges. It became my way of coping with the stresses of life, the challenges I didn't want to face. Every drink took me a little further away from reality, a little deeper into a haze where everything felt easier, even if just for a moment. I started seeking out those moments more and more. I'd find excuses to drink, celebrations, bad days, even boredom. It didn't take long before one drink turned into several, and what was once a casual habit became a need. I couldn't get through a day without it. I didn't see it as a problem at first. It was just something I did to unwind, to feel better. But the truth was, I was losing control even if I couldn't admit it to myself. But it didn't stop at alcohol. As my drinking increased, so did my exposure to other vices. The same circles that encouraged my drinking also introduced me to drugs. It started with just a puff of a joint, something passed around at a party. But just like with alcohol, that first taste led to more. Soon, I was mixing drinks with marijuana, chasing a high that seemed just out of reach. The line between social drinking and substance abuse blurred, and I found myself caught in a cycle I couldn't break. Addiction doesn't just take from you. It consumes everything in its path, leaving behind nothing but ruins. My finances were the first casualty. What started as a harmless. The more I spent, the deeper I sank into debt. But by then, I was too far gone to care. It tore through my relationships as well. My family, once my biggest support, started to drift away. They tried to help at first, offering advice, pleading with me to get my act together. But I was stubborn, defensive. I couldn't see that my addiction was the problem, so I pushed them away. The few friends I had left didn't fare much better. Those who didn't share my habits slowly disappeared from my life. They got tired of the drunken calls in the middle of the night, the broken promises, and the constant excuses. The friends who stayed around were just as lost as I was, and we enabled each other's vices. I became a shadow of my former self, unrecognizable even to myself. My health deteriorated rapidly. It was just another day in my bleak. I had run out of marijuana and needed a fix. The dealer I usually bought from wasn't far, just a few blocks away in a rundown part of town that had become all too familiar to me. I'd done this countless times, the exchange of money for a small bag that would numb the pain for a little while. But that day, something was different. The dealer, a man I'd known for years, seemed on edge. I handed him the money, expecting the usual transaction to go smoothly, but instead, he started arguing over the amount. I knew it was the right amount, I'd counted it twice, but he wasn't having it. The argument escalated quickly, voices rising, tensions flaring. Before I could even process what was happening, one of his boys shoved me hard. I stumbled back, but I didn't have time to react before they were all on me. I tried to defend myself, but it was useless. They were too many, and I was too weak, my body too worn down from years of abuse. I felt a sharp pain in my side, then another blow to my head. Everything became a blur of fists, kicks, and searing pain. My world started to fade as the beating continued. I could hear their voices, angry and cruel, but the sounds were growing distant, muffled, as if I was underwater. At some point, the pain began to fade, too. It wasn't that they'd stopped hitting me. I could still feel the dull thud of their kicks, but it was as if my body had stopped responding. I was floating somewhere between consciousness and oblivion. The last thing I remember was lying on the cold, hard ground, my vision blurring, my breath shallow and labored. My thoughts were slipping away, and a strange, terrifying thought crossed my mind. This could be the end. And then, just like that, everything went silent. I could no longer feel the pain, no longer hear their voices. I found myself hovering above the scene, weightless and detached, looking down at the chaos below. My body lay crumpled on the ground, motionless, while the men who had attacked me were still kicking at my lifeless form. It was a shock, seeing myself from above, like watching a movie where I was both the actor and the audience. That's my body down there. I'm dead. But there was no denying it. I was dead, or at least something very close to it. And yet, I could still see, hear, and even feel, though it was different now, as if all my senses had been heightened. I could hear the faintest sounds, the shuffling of feet, the distant hum of traffic. Everything seemed so vivid, so real, yet so impossibly strange. The street scene below started to blur and fade, replaced by a darkness. Panic gripped me, but I was powerless to resist the pull. The darkness closed in, and then, like the pages of a book flipping rapidly, the world around me changed. I was no longer floating above my body, but descending into a place far more terrifying. The air was filled with the screams of countless souls echoed in every direction. The heat was unbearable, searing my skin, yet I wasn't burning. Shadows moved all around me, dark and twisted forms that seemed to be watching, waiting. I had no doubt where I was. Hell was far worse than anything I could have imagined. Everywhere I looked, there was suffering. Souls were in pain, their souls treated in unnatural positions as they were tortured by demonic creatures. These demons were monstrous, some with razor-sharp claws, others with multiple heads or wings that dripped with molten lava. They took pleasure in inflicting pain. I watched in horror as addicts were force-fed their vices, alcoholics drowning in endless barrels of toxic liquid, smokers choking on thick, black smoke that filled their lungs, and drug users injected with searing, venomous substances that twisted their bodies in agony. The torment was relentless, and the screams of the tortured is disturbing. In the midst of this horror, my eyes caught sight of a familiar face, a face I hadn't seen in years. It was Kelvin, my old friend, the one who had died when we were just 17. He was barely recognizable, his face in pain. I knew it was him. The shock of seeing him here, in this terrible place, was overwhelming. I had always wondered what had happened to him after he died, and now I knew the horrifying truth. Kelvin's eyes met mine, and for a moment there was a recognition. We both knew who the other was, but there were no words, no greetings, just a shared, unspoken understanding of the agony we were both experiencing. The realization that he had been suffering in this hellish place for 20 years hit me hard. 20 years of torment, with no hope of escape, no end in sight. And now I was here too, condemned to the same fate. Hell wasn't just a place of fire and brimstone. It was a place of eternal, unending suffering, where the worst parts of our lives came back to haunt us, amplified 1,000 times over. The horrors I witnessed were beyond anything I could have imagined, and the thought of spending eternity in this place filled me with a terror that words cannot describe. As I was dragged deeper into the abyss, I began to see areas of hell reserved for specific torments. I found myself witnessing the fates of those who had committed particular sins. The first area I saw was for the blasphemers, those who had spoken or acted against the Holy Spirit. Their torment was unlike anything I had seen before. They were chained to enormous pillars of fire, their mouths forced open by demonic hands. Blazing coals were shoved into their throats, burning them from the inside out, yet they could not die. Demons lashed at them with fiery whips, each strike causing their bodies to convulse in agony. But there was no escape, no reprieve. Next, I was shown the place reserved for those who had taken their own lives. The suicides were trapped in a never-ending cycle of death and rebirth, each time more painful than the last. They were bound by chains made of their own despair, forced to relive the moment of their death over and over again. I saw them flinging themselves into pits of fire, only to be resurrected at the edge of the pit, whole but tormented by the searing pain they had just endured. Each time they were resurrected, they seemed more broken, more hollow, but the cycle never ended. Their faces were etched with eternal sorrow, a reflection of the hopelessness they had felt in life, now magnified 1,000-fold in death. In another area, I saw those who had deceived others in the name of God, false pastors and religious leaders who had twisted the truth for their gain. They were tormented by the very lies they had spread. Each one was forced to wear a crown of thorns, the points digging deep into their skulls, while demons whispered their false teachings back to them, the words like acid in their ears. Their hands were bound by heavy chains of gold, the symbol of the wealth they had accumulated through deception. and they were dragged through the fiery pits by these chains. Their cries for mercy were met with cruel laughter from the demons who tortured them, reminding them of the souls they had led astray. The fire consumed them slowly, burning away the deceitful masks they had worn in life, leaving nothing but the raw, tormented souls beneath. In the midst of the unbearable torment, just when I thought all hope was lost, something unexpected happened. I felt a force, a presence that cut through the darkness of hell. It was unlike anything I had experienced there. I felt something like a hand gripping me by the waist. The touch was firm, and it began to lift me, pulling me away from the demons that tormented me. The pain and suffering around me began to fade as I was lifted higher and higher, away from the fire, the screams, and the endless agony. It was as if a powerful force was rescuing me from the depths of hell, and all I could feel was an overwhelming sense of relief as the torment began to disappear. Before I knew it, I found myself back in my body. The first thing I became aware of was the environment of the hospital. The bright lights above me. My chest felt heavy, and my body ached as though it had been through an unimaginable ordeal. I struggled to take a breath, my lungs burning as if they were waking up after a long slumber. In the days that followed, as I lay in the hospital bed recovering, I was told that I had been unconscious for about 21 days. The news was shocking because, to me, it felt like only a few hours had passed since the attack. What I had experienced in that other realm, what felt like a journey of a few hours, had somehow spanned nearly 3 weeks in the physical world. As I began to recover in the hospital, I had plenty of time to reflect on the experience that had changed my life forever. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still feel the heat of the flames, hear the cries of those who were trapped there, and see the despair in their eyes. I realized that I had narrowly escaped a fate that could have been mine for eternity. As I reflected on everything, one decision became clear to me. I had to quit smoking and turn my life around. The thought of returning to the habits that had led me down such a dark path was unbearable. I knew that I couldn't continue living the way I had been. The craving for cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs still lingered, but the fear of what awaited me if I didn't change was stronger. I resolved to quit smoking, to stop drinking, and to leave behind the life of addiction that had almost destroyed me. In my quest to change, I turned to the one place I had always ignored, the church. I began attending services regularly, seeking solace and guidance in the teachings. The more I learned, the more I realized how far I had strayed from the path of righteousness. I started praying daily, asking for strength and forgiveness, and I immersed myself in the community of believers who supported my transformation. The church became my refuge, a place where I could grow spiritually and rebuild my life. Slowly but surely, the chains of my old life began to fall away. The reality of hell that I witnessed is not something I want to take lightly. It is a terrifying place, filled with suffering beyond imagination, and it's a place no one should ever have to experience. I urge everyone watching this to take your faith seriously. Hell is a real place, and the choices we make in life have eternal consequences. It's not just about avoiding sin. It's about genuinely dedicating ourselves to living according to God's will. Our time on this earth is limited, and the decisions we make will shape our eternal destiny. Living a life dedicated to God is not just about attending church or performing religious rituals. It's about transforming your heart and mind, embracing His teachings, and striving to live a life of righteousness and love. It's about making daily choices that align with His Word and seeking His guidance in all things. Don't wait until it's too late to change. The second chance I was given is a rare and precious gift. Use this opportunity to evaluate your life, make the necessary changes, and commit to a path that honors God. Your spiritual well-being and eternal future depend on it. All right, friends, this brings us to end of today's experience. Kindly like, and share this video with your friends and families. Kindly subscribe to our channel and turn on your notification bell icon to be the first to get updated anytime we upload a new experience sent to us. Remain blessed